we go. And now I have to change my view option so that I can get to my notes. Once again, welcome everyone. Happy Wednesday, hump day. And welcome to Calculating Success, Rethinking Wisconsin's Recycling Grant Formula. My name is Melissa Johnson. I am the president of Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin. We are the sponsors of this webinar. Some of you on this Zoom are Arrow members. Some of you aren't. If you're new to Arrow, I've never heard of us before. We are a 501c3. We are Wisconsin's recycling professionals. We are the leaders in the state and the experts who manage your programs across the state of Wisconsin. Arrow first began its life in 1990, and its mission is to provide statewide proactive leadership on waste reduction and recycling through education, advocacy, collaboration, programs, and services. And one of our goals is to inform the public, lawmaking bodies, the business community, and those involved with solid waste management of the environmental and economic importance of waste reduction, recycling, product stewardship, and resource recovery. We are a membership-based organizations with members from the private sector of the solid waste industry, the public sector of those managing waste in our communities, nonprofit, educational institution, and businesses. Once again, we really appreciate your attendance here, and we hope you find this of benefit. If you want additional information after this is over, you can reach out to us and find us at Recycle More Wisconsin and click on the arrow tab, and you'll find a quick way to find us. And there'll be opportunities for questions at the end of this, so please stick around for that. I am now going to turn this over to Karen Sieg and to Jennifer Semro. Karen is our executive director, and Jennifer is the waste reduction and diversion coordinator for Wisconsin DNR. So take it away, ladies.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, as Melissa just mentioned, my name is Jennifer Semro. I'm the waste reduction and diversion coordinator for the DNR. So I serve in the capacity of the statewide recycling coordinator, so overseeing our responsible unit recycling programs. So I also am an Arrow board member, and again, happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please, Karen. First, to give a bit of background and to make sure that we're all on the same page on, what is even a responsible unit. So responsible units were set up when the original recycling law was established back in 1989. And it was set up such that every single local government was designated as a responsible unit. So a responsible unit could be a city, town, or village. However, some counties opted to take on that role and on behalf of their municipalities. So we do also have counties that are responsible units. In addition, tribes may be responsible units, or a combination of local governments in the form of a solid waste management system. But whatever unit of government it is, that unit is then responsible, hence responsible unit, for establishing an effective recycling program. With that responsibility did come some funding. So the original recycling law also established a responsible unit grant program, and the grant can be used for costs associated with planning, constructing, or operating one or more of the components of an effective recycling program or yard waste program. The timeline of the RU grants is a little wonky, so I just want to lay it out here. RUs actually apply in advance of the year that they're going to receive the grant. So literally, I think just yesterday, we opened up the grant period for 2022. So between now and October 1st, RUs will apply for a grant for next year. Then 2022 happens, you operate your program, you incur expenses, and then by April 30th of the following year, so in this example, by April 30th of 2023, RUs will submit an annual report to the department, which will provide us your actual expenses from 2022, your tonnage information, and some other details. So you actually apply in advance and then reconcile it a year afterwards. So sometimes folks get confused. They think they're applying for a grant in April, or I just did that. That's sort of the outline of the timeline of things. If an RU does not submit their grant by that October 1st deadline, all is not lost. There is a graduated scale where RUs still receive a portion of their funding up until October 30th. Next slide, Karen. Thank you. So where does the recycling grant funding come from? On each ton of municipal solid waste that is disposed of in Wisconsin landfills, there is a $7 per ton recycling fee. Those monies are then deposited into the environmental management account. There's a number of different funding sources for the environmental management account, but the landfills are the primary funding source. So the recycling fee generates about $30 to $35 million each year. And again, that's based on how much waste we're putting into the landfill. And a portion of that is just distributed back to municipalities in the form of the RU grant that we're going to discuss further today. The fee is also used for DNR administration, so staff positions like myself. The EMA is also used to support some other environmentally related programs, such as the DADCAP Clean Sweep program for the collection of hazardous materials and pharmaceuticals, county land conservation grants, non-point source pollution grants, and others. At its highest level, the grant that was distributed to responsible units was $32.7 million per year, and that was back in 2008. Historically, we have seen that recycling fee dollars have been siphoned off for non-environmental purposes, a concern of those of us in the industry. Next slide, please. So this chart on the right is from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau's informational paper. The LFB produces a paper that goes into significant detail on the recycling grant and the recycling program overall every 2 years. And I will, when I'm done with my portion of the presentation, maybe drop a link to this report in the chat. But what this table is demonstrating is obviously since the beginning of the recycling program, 1992 through present, as in last year, 2020, the second column being net eligible recycling costs. So basically, how much did it cost municipalities to operate their recycling programs? Then the third column is the award amount. How much in grants did the state distribute to communities to help offset those costs? And then the percentage, so if we distributed X amount of grants and you had X amount of costs, how much of those costs were covered? So what we can see here is that the percent of costs that are covered over time has decreased pretty significantly. So in the beginning, around 50% of an RU's costs were covered on average. That is now 14.4% today. Again, as was mentioned earlier, you can also see the grant amounts, the highest being the $32.7 million in 2008. And you can also see that the present distribution of $20 million has been that way for a number of years. The $20 million that's awarded right now is divided up into two different grant programs. There's what we call the basic grant program, which is what most RUs apply for and receive, and that is $19 million. And then there is a smaller grant called the Recycling Consolidation Grant Program of $1 million that RUs qualify for either based on their size or participating in an eligible activity. And again, presently, only about 14% of our net eligible costs are being covered by the grant. Next slide. So how is the grant award distributed? We'll get into how it is distributed a bit later, but it is not distributed per capita. So it is not based on the population of the responsible unit. And we do have a significant amount of variability in how much is covered on a per capita basis. So we do have RUs that receive less than $1 per capita and those that have $10 or over. As you can see on this chart, the average cost is $3.43 per capita. But I was just looking at our data and I believe the RU, the least per capita was 16 cents and the highest was over $32. So again, just a huge variability in the amount of how the grant is distributed on a per capita basis. Next slide, please. So again, another way to look at how the grant is distributed as a percentage of the net eligible cost. So again, we had mentioned previously that on average, 14% of costs are covered by the grant, but that's an average. We do have some programs that have nearly 100% of their costs covered. We have had some instances each year, not very many, maybe just one or two, where the grant that they received exceeded their costs and they had to pay the DNR back a little bit of money. And then again, we have RUs, 347 that have less than 10% of their costs covered. So again, just significant variability in how much costs are covered from RUA to RUB. Next slide, please. So this slide, I apologize already for the length of text on it and also the complication, but this is what we deal with our grant formula. And this is the grant formula in 1999. And you may ask, why are we talking about that today? And I'll get to that, so please stay with me. So the formula is a complex formula based on eligible expenses, avoided disposal costs, and other factors. So avoided disposal costs are costs that the RU saves, they don't pay in the form of landfill tipping fees. And it's because that material is recycled versus disposing of it in a landfill. So that's viewed as a benefit to responsible units, to communities, that they don't have to pay those landfill tip fees. The average landfill tip fee in 1999 was $30 per ton. So that's what's used in this 1999 calculation. So first, when we want to determine how to distribute the funds, for all of the RUs, we take 66% of their eligible expenses that they submit to us in their application, minus the avoided disposal costs. And then we also calculate $8 per capita. Then looking at those two calculations, it's determined which of those two amounts is less. So then you have that math. But then next you compare this amount with 33% of eligible expenses. And the RU is intended to receive the greater of those two amounts. But there's also an exception for counties. Counties that are responsible units for at least 75% of the population are intended to get a minimum grant of $100,000 or the lesser of step one. However, when the total grant allocation can't cover the $8 per capita for those RUs, then the specification is to use $6 per capita, or the 66% times the eligible expenses minus disposal costs. Anyone confused yet? I'm gonna ask if there's a quiz at the end. So finally, once all of these calculations are done, and we do have a computer system that does this, we need to prorate this because there's not enough money to actually distribute it based on all of the above. So we end up doing all of these calculations and determinations and then prorate the grants by an equal percentage based on the available funding. So some of you on this very webinar may have contacted me at some point in the past and said, if I were to join with another RU, what would my grant be? And this is why we cannot tell you, because this calculation basically only happens once, and it's once all of those applications are submitted and the eligible expenses are in the system. So there's like no way for us to predict what a grant will be because of the inputs that are necessary to do this calculation. Deep breath. Okay, next slide, please, Karen. Okay, so again, why are we talking about 1999? Our current formula is basically the same percentage of a grant that you received in 1999. And this has been the case since 2001. So if in 1999, you as an RU received 1.5% of the grant pie, then today you receive 1.5% of the grant pie. The reason that this is the case, the grant is essentially frozen at 1999 inputs, is because back in 1999, there was legislation proposed that would modify the grant distribution to a per capita. It would just be based on population. But as a result of the governor's line item veto, the formula was changed to this proportional distribution of awards based on 1999. Obviously, this creates some challenges. It means that the current distribution does not account for changes since 1999. Things like if you transition to automated collection and carts, or you may have decreased some of your services. Maybe you discontinued curbside yard waste collection to save money. So any of those increases or decreases with your program and those expenses aren't reflected. The other key thing here is that it's the amount that you received in 1999 or would have received. Where this comes into play is if you didn't exist in 1999. Again, we do have RUs that form and become new RUs, i.e. we have a city and a town and they want to work together, and so they join together and form a new RU. Or we have a case where just last year, the Dunn County Responsible Unit dissolved. So all of those individual communities then themselves became responsible units. So again, none of those folks existed in our system as RUs in 1999. So we have to create them as they would have existed in 1999. So we take their current application, we depreciate their expenses back to 1999, we do that wonky formula on the previous slide, and we figure out what grant they would have gotten in 1999 to like input them into this award system. I think that's all I can say about that. So next slide, please, Karen. So this creates unpredictable and sometimes weird results when we have RU mergers or divorces, subtraction or addition of members. And again, it's because things are frozen at this point in time. So a couple of examples that have happened within the past couple of years that I'm aware of. We had a village which incorporated into a town. Since the village didn't exist in 1999, it's treated as a new RU. As a town, the award that the RU had received was about $2,059. In 1999, their application, they had identified expenses of $14,105. When the village then submitted a new application as a new RU, they had lower expenses. I don't know exactly what program changes they made, but they had lower expenses of $2,400. So when that was depreciated to $1,999, it was about $1,300. So the result was that the village had a grant award significantly less than what they had been receiving for multiple years as a town. They received $397 versus over $2,000 that they had been receiving previously. A second example, and this one, I guess was even more concerning, I guess just to me personally, we had a town and a village that were individual RUs. The town was receiving a grant of around $19,000 and the village was receiving a grant of around $29,000. They decided to merge and become a single RU. Based on the inputs on their new application, depreciating it back to 1999, putting it into the whole formula, their combined grant ended up being around $30,000. So to be honest, they were a little miffed that, you know, they thought that they were doing a good thing. They were merging the programs, they were joining together, and yet they took this basically financial penalty. And again, it's all just based on a couple of slides ago and how the formula is set up to be distributed. Next slide, please, Karen. All right, so I think that that's where I'm going to pass it over to Karen. Again, I apologize for my remarks being so terribly confusing potentially, but we're looking forward to discussion and Q&A at the end. So pass it on to you, Karen.
All right, well, thank you, Jennifer. To be very honest, even for my own sake and I maybe for others, I appreciated all that detail because if it weren't listed, it's really hard to follow and to really understand and grasp all these subtleties and complications. And there is an opportunity at this time for a change. And maybe I'll further introduce myself. I'm Karen Sigg, the current Executive Director for Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin. And so again, Arrow really wants to help educate people about all this information. So I appreciate Jennifer, her role in sharing this detail so we all understand it a little bit better. The thing with the formula is that it is in state statutes. And so if there were to be any changes, it needs to go through and be changed at a state legislative level. And as Melissa had brought up, the Legislative Audit Bureau had a report. They had looked at the recycling program earlier, well, this past year, came out with a report and trying to understand, you know, how's it working? What are opportunities for improvement, et cetera. And within that report, there was a reference, well, yeah, if there were going to be changes to the formula, that there are some issues and concerns that it would need to be handled on a legislative level because of it being in the state statutes. So there was, again, reference of possibly changing these, that if, again, this is a complicated kind of system, and as Jennifer explained, some unpredictable results. So on behalf of Arrow, this has, because many of our members are RUs, that, you know, we understand the, you know, possible ramifications and or complications of even changing what is already a complicated system. And so knowing that there will still be, there's no real, let's say, perfect system, but this really, really is an opportunity following the Legislative Audit Bureau's report and just this timing of these things becoming more and more apparent, that this is an opportunity, and that maybe we look at this a little bit more carefully and get people's input to evaluate if and how, you know, exactly we could change this. So I'm going to just cover a few potential new methods for the grant formula. So again, learn from Jennifer what it has been based on this combination, a little bit of, you know, again, costs, a little bit of portion with per capita, but I'm going to go into if the formula was changed exclusively to some of these other systems, you know, kind of what that would mean, and or what are those systems issues or maybe concerns to be thinking about before moving on. So some that have been mentioned and or other have been something weight-based, per capita based, strictly per capita, and some version of criteria or performance-based. So I'm just going to review some of those details about each one of those. All right. With weight-based, the idea is that, well, gee, everybody's got to collect all this stuff, and we want more stuff to go to recycling. We want waste to not go into the landfill. So this could be really a good way to maybe measure or to, you know, base the formula upon. Unfortunately, with this idea, that it would typically be based strictly on inbound materials to the recycling facilities. But then unfortunately, it doesn't really connect to what the facilities, the material recovery facilities or MRFs, really market and or maybe actually recycle. So the amount of inbound recyclable contaminants could really vary a lot depending on every program, how it's collected, how often, what kind of education program they have, et cetera. So again, it's not accounting that there could be a lot of contamination materials in that inbound material based on just a weight. And so then again, if you're getting rewarded for that weight, then it inversely, you know, conversely de-incentivizes collecting quality materials, which again, back to our really essential for on the MRF and on the outbound end. And so with not encouraging quality materials and this increased in contamination at the MRFs, you know, it increases their operational expenses and costs, and materials end up being landfilled anyway. So, you know, they can't market them, they're, and or they're just not in a recyclable condition, et cetera. Anyway, it's you end up landfilling either way. to be very honest, more challenging thing for the responsible units is that it's more difficult to gather accurate and representative weights for each responsible unit's materials. We learned that there's quite a large number of responsible units, over 1,000. And just for efficiencies, haulers too, they're going to collect materials that could cross over a number of responsible units. They often on routes will also collect different types of materials from different kinds of entities, such as, again, residential and commercial. And so it's really difficult to really quantify and know an accurate account of saying, village of so-and-so, your residents put this much out, and you guys collected this amount, and and the town of, and the this and that. So it's really difficult to, very challenging to get that kind of accurate information on the detail that would really be helpful for each village, town, again, each responsible unit. So that is one, those are some of the downfalls or concerns about a strictly weight-based kind of formula. The other possibility is truly basing it on per capita, where the community, if you have a population of 20,000, you're going to get X amount based on that, versus, oh, you have 250,000. Okay, you get just a set amount based on the number of people in your community. The cost, though, for each program of those different communities could really vary a lot. So it could depend on whether, the density, is it a rural or an urban community? So your collection, for example, could really vary based on that population density. And then how far are you from a MRF or a transfer facility that will transfer those materials to a MRF? And again, the costs will, especially again, if you're a rural one, you may have to transport those materials quite a distance to get to a processing facility. And then again, that affects your costs differently. The again, some smaller communities might have self-haul type programs, or contracted with, or self-haul where they also, like the city of Madison might have, where they have their own haulers, versus contracted with a private company. Those are also can be variations. The access to drop-off services as well, or is it a curbside? Again, back to that rural versus urban. The frequency of pickups will also affect your costs, if it's every week, every other week, monthly, etc. And then if yard materials are included in your program costs. So again, could vary a lot, even though, again, if it's just based on population. The other issue or concern being aware of is that populations can vary quite a bit in our state, especially with a high tourism. And think of like the Wisconsin Dells area, the northern cities, say Minocqua areas, where again, you get large influxes of people at peak times a year, where your population could just, double or quadruple in some cases, kind of thing. So, and those population swings are not accounted for in the grant process. And so again, a community, an RU could have much higher costs depending on that different kind of population swings. And then again, it doesn't really promote any improvements in your program, just because, we got this many people, we're just getting the same amount no matter what. We don't need to really worry about collecting quality material. Again, back to which is really what the recycling industry is really seeking to get, so that we have effective and cost-effective programs as well, not collecting and or handling basically the contamination garbage items that only go to the landfill in the end anyhow. So that those are, again, it could be simple, but it has its limitations too on a per capita based kind of formula. Another consideration could be something that's more criteria performance based. And the idea is that, you know, again, you would be rewarding communities who are trying to do a little bit better or do a really, really good job, not just, you know, waiting like, oh, the money's just going to come in kind of in no matter what kind of way. The theory would be to build on data that is already being collected within the system and the reporting system, but to create some kind of point value system with weighted values for program criteria. And in talking with Jennifer and the DNR, we totally understand, realize that if this were to be part of a formula, all responses must be very direct, simple, objective, straight, you know, very straightforward, so that they can objectively, you know, just put them into their calculations and, you know, be able to evaluate the scoring, et cetera. So that would be it's very important to get that system set up and to realize that, you know, well, if it's going to be objective, you got to be very, you know, very detailed on how you would do that. Some elements that could be considered in some kind of criteria performance based, again, based on the things that are already included and are required as part of the effective recycling program, could be their level type of enforcement. You know, they do have to have an ordinance, but what do they do for actually enforcing or assuring that people are compliant? It could also be based somewhat on the level of services that, you know, you're going to collect more or maybe better services if you have what kind of access, and is it a little bit more often than monthly? You might get awarded a little bit higher. Obviously you have more costs, but again, you're trying to be very service oriented to your resident in your community. Another one could be whether or not you have yard waste options. Is it collected? Do you have a drop off? Do you have nothing at all? That could be something that could be considered as well. And really, even though it's maybe more challenging to figure out how would this be really direct and simple, but, you know, the education and outreach. Some communities maybe put a flyer in once a year and call it good. Some might have a website. Some might be mailing the flyers, you know, in other kinds of billing. They may have a Facebook page. They might, you know, have a variety of stuff because they really want that information to get out there. So there could be ways that those things are taken in consideration in the formula as well. So that, again, we're trying to have good programs going on. One criteria-based example was shown in the forward report, and the forward is the future of Wisconsin's recycling development. And this is another complicated looking chart, I agree, you know, admit, but over on the left side, you can see, you know, if it's, let's say, a rural curbside recycling, you know, you talk about your access. Well, is it, you know, you get 1 point if it's monthly or less, whereas you might get 5 points if it was weekly. And so that's just shows an example of how this could work on a weighted type system. And so just this is strictly as an example of where this was thought about a little bit, teased out somewhat, and put in as a possibility in the forward report, but just wanting to let folks know that it's been kind of thought about at some level previously. So with this, I'm going to be turning it over to Melissa to facilitate some discussion, listening type things. Really appreciate, again, this opportunity to just share this information and to get input, and that we are looking for, again, more input. This was also as much as informative purpose, educational, as it is to get feedback as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Jennifer. Very thorough, a lot of information. And I realize that it really is a lot of information, some of it new to many of you possibly. And even those of us who are, quite versed in this, we find something new with this recycling grant formula and are used all the time. That's why Arrow works so hard to support our members with the right kind of information to ensure their success. And really, this is your opportunity too. Many of you are running recycling programs. Maybe you're just interested in recycling. You may have some questions about the recycling grant and how it's used. We will be following this up with a survey so we can get some information, because we do want to share that not only with Arrow members, but with our friends at the DNR and also in the legislature, because I think it's really important to hear from constituents. So the people out in the world actually doing this work. So I guess, asking a question, what works well with your recycling program right now? And if you want to raise your hand, I'd love to hear from somebody. Red, we have one, and is it Regan?
Hi, yeah, it's Reagan. I just want to say thanks for putting all this work and having this event for us. I just had a note about any reporting or anything that would require a weight-based incentive. I think it would disincentivize overall waste reduction. A lot of communities are working to prevent waste from entering the landfill or recycling stream in general. And so just to take that into consideration when we talk about that performance standard and using that to, put out funding for different communities is my only comment on that.
Yeah, great comment. Thank you, Regan. I appreciate that. And where are you from, Regan?
Eau Claire County. I just started actually in May, so I'm the new recycling coordinator.
Welcome to the industry. We're glad to have you. Anyone else? What are your thoughts? Kind of patrolling the Brady Bunch boxes.
Hi, this is Crystal. I have a quick question.
Sure, Crystal, go ahead.
I was wondering why the grant formula in 2001 was changed to be kept at the 1999 rate. What was the push behind that?
Sure, good question, Crystal. And for those who don't know, Crystal is a scientist with Foth Environmental. So identify yourself so that everybody on the call will know. And maybe Jennifer, you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So there was an attempt to modify the recycling grant formula back in 2001. And the idea was they were looking to move it to a per capita distribution. For whatever reason, the governor at the time did not support that action. And so via line item veto, literally, crossing out select words in that legislation, we ended up with it being based on 1999. So, I mean, that is what happened. I don't know exactly why that occurred in such a fashion, but that's why we are frozen at 1999 expenses and distribution criteria.
Most powerful veto pen in the country, as they say. There's an online question in the chat box, and Jennifer, you might be a good one to answer this, and anyone else who is running a program. Is it better to have a recycling Facebook page or a Facebook group? What are your thoughts, Jennifer?
Yeah, I can certainly start out, but just recognizing some of our friends in the attendee list, I might ask Amanda or Annalise to also jump in. But because I'm not super familiar with Facebook groups as opposed to recycling Facebook pages. I guess I can promote the fact that Arrow does have a Facebook page called the Recycle More Wisconsin Facebook page. And I even do help facilitate some of the content on that page to try to get out statewide recycling right educational messages. So I know we use that as a tool. DNR also has a Facebook page, but of course it covers a variety of subject matter, not just recycling and waste management. But I'm not super familiar with Facebook groups. So again, if one of our colleagues on the meeting here on the line can pop in, that'd be great.
Sure. Annalise Smith from Waukesha County has her hand raised. Go ahead, Annalise.
So the biggest difference between, to my knowledge, between pages and groups is really to think about what your goal for the venue is. Pages are really good for creating content and then pushing it out to large numbers of people that are interested in getting that content, whereas groups are more collaborative. So where all people can post to the group and then all of the members of that group can see the conversations that come from it. So if you are trying to just educate residents about contamination, waste reduction, things to that nature, a page probably would be better. But if you were trying to build a group to encourage like a buy nothing trade group, then you would want to use a group.
Thank you, Annalise. I guess, you know, does anyone on today have any sort of specific ideas on how to improve the grant formula? Have you never thought of it before, so this is a surprise? And or what would be the best option? Annalise, you still have your hand up. Are you responding?
I had a new kind of building off the question you were just asking. If
Okay,
no one else
please
had.
go ahead. Please go ahead.
So I think from our perspective, anything that can encourage collaboration, I think that we as Arrow members understand the value of collaboration in this industry. And so and there is the collaboration grant, but as it was pointed out in the presentation, I believe it's 1/20th of the total grant funds that are distributed. So anything that moving forward that could encourage meaningful collaboration that provides a higher quality service to the residents would be something that we would really feel strongly about.
Thank you, Annalise. I would love to hear from another responsible unit or someone running a MRF on thoughts on this. Since I know many of you, I may end up calling on you. How about Outagamie County? I see we have, looks like Brian is on and Alex. Any thoughts about the grant and the impact possibly on not only your responsible unit of recycling, but you're one of the largest MRFs in Wisconsin?
Hi there, so Alex Neck from Outagamie County, Recycling and Resource Recovery Administrator here. I guess for us, being a tri-county partnership, but only one of us being the responsible unit makes things a little different for us. We have to operate our budgets and basically just our operations a little different than our partners. So that makes things, I don't want to say difficult, but different. They don't have to take into consideration a lot of what we do. For us, I know we contract the hauling, and that is a big expense for us. So that's where most of our costs come in, as opposed to some facilities where it is more transportation or tipping fees at the MRF, perhaps. So I guess I'm just excited or interested to hear what the other possibilities are to get or to change the grant formula.
Melissa, you're muted.
See? Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you sharing and willing to speak up. Is there anyone on from some of our newest RUs over in Dunn County? I would love to hear just your perspective, how things are going and some of your concerns or some of your successes that you're realizing.
This is Megan Hines for City of Menominee, one of the newest RUs here in Dunn County. I think relatively speaking, we're doing pretty well here, but we do have full-time staff that helps out with our RU, which I think makes a big difference. But yes, I think incentivizing collaboration with the dissolution of Dunn County's RU, things happened pretty quickly. A lot of RUs each municipality became their RUs. There was some collaboration, but I think incentivizing that collaboration would get a lot of us to look more towards doing things together again, like we had similarly in the past.
Thank you, Megan. Other RUs that some things that you think should be included in a grant formula, or any specific idea on what you think would be some of the best outcomes for a change? What would be your concerns or your fears? Let's start there.
This is Amanda with Portage County Solid Waste. We're the RU on behalf of most of the municipalities here in Portage County. And I think over the years, we've lost some of our municipalities because we don't have much to offer. They can come out of our program and still get a grant and still run their programs basically the way they were. My biggest fear is if it goes to something slightly different, we won't be getting as much grant money, and then the free programs that we do offer that municipalities don't realize that we do, such as bulky rigid collection, sharps collection for all residents, no matter who you are in the county. We offset some of those costs, and I'm afraid if the grant formula changes too much, we as Portage County will lose money, and then we will no longer be able to run those free programs that benefit everyone. And so I think collaboration is a big one that needs to stay within part of the grant formula, so that we can get somehow a little bit more money to help offset those programs that do help everyone in the community and not just, the one community. And then education too, I think is a big key component. I would like to see some sort of weight-based system on education. Do you just do a Facebook page, or do you go out and have an educator, full-time staff, or something? But I know that's very hard to track. And so I can see that being very muddy as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Kind of the theme I'm hearing is people are talking about different, performance standards, extra programs, things that are beneficial to the community that are add-ons to the, curbside recycling programs. And so in some cases, it sounds like these are now really kind of embedded into the programs, but if financing changes, we may end up losing some of those. And so we need to be mindful of that. And it may be something we want to consider as those things that we actually want to try and incentivize if they're that beneficial to communities. Sally from Dunn County, I'll read the comments. This is wonderful. Jennifer, you're going to be pleased. It says, this is Sally from town of Dunn in Dunn County. New RUs since October 2020. I am still confused and just trying to take it all in and keep my head above water. Bless you. Thank you for your help. Your people are wonderful. Jennifer, you are a blessing. I think that goes on your performance evaluation. I'm not sure. Just to let Kate know. You may want to copy that, take a screenshot and share that. So, but I agree with that. You are a blessing to all of us, and we're very lucky to have you. Regan, I see you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the sentiment that Amanda and you had mentioned about, the educational programming and performance measures, because, in Eau Claire County, we contract all of our waste haulers are private businesses. And so a lot of what we do is education and outreach to the community and communicating, what can go in curbside and all of our special programs that we do offer. So yeah, seeing some type of performance measures in the grant application would be beneficial to us, I think.
Thank you, Regan.
Lisa, would it be okay if I made a comment?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So yeah, I guess something I may have, glossed over in my remarks. So I think some of the charts that I pulled from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau paper showed that there's like 1,038 grant recipients in our latest year. We do have some communities that do not apply for a grant, so we actually have more than 1,038 RUs. We have about 1,080, I think, about as of this year, with again some of the new Dunn County responsible units. The other thing that I didn't share is we do have a lot of very, very small responsible units. So just recognizing that fact, I pulled the data point again from the same Legislative Fiscal Bureau paper, and 743 of our 1,000 plus RUs have a population of less than 2,500 people. So the vast majority of the responsible units are small communities. And so just recognizing some of the differences between, county RUs, with as I think Megan mentioned, full-time staff versus, maybe somebody like Sally, where, they have, 1,000 different duties, and the recycling portion is, 0.1% of what they need to accomplish in a year. So I just wanted to put that data point out there just on how many small RUs we have.
That's absolutely a really important point. Valerie Parker from the Village of Weston in Marathon County has her hand up. Go ahead, Valerie.
Yes, and I was going to say it's so disheartening when you see municipalities that are out there, some larger municipalities that do not offer a program at all. They basically leave it up to their taxpayers to hold their own service, and then the haulers don't push the recycling end of it. And so there's like no education, no nothing. And I just think it should be across the board. I think it would help spread the message of the importance and how to recycle.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, recycle more and recycle right. We of course want to promote recycling, but we also want to promote recycling right, because if materials end up at a MRF that are not recyclable and we simply throw them into the recycling bin, that MRF is at a financial risk because they now bear the expense of managing those non-saleable items. So really good points. Thank you, Valerie.
I'm just gonna pop in, Melissa, because in some ways you took what I was just about to say about that education. For me, the education is important with the recycling law. It really was a waste hierarchy with waste reduction at the top, and acknowledging then recycling is part of the system, but it really was the whole 1989 law included waste reduction. So that education can help on that side. As Regan had mentioned too, we don't necessarily want people to put more just to put more in of the recycling. That is a disincentive of waste reduction. And then you just alluded, which here's where, again, Outagamie County, Portage County, those who have MRFs, I'd like we have time for them to address how important from their perspective, just to verbalize it, is it to receive quality materials? Thank you.
Sure. How about a quick survey on a scale of 1 to 10? And we could do that quickly and try to wrap that up, of those municipally owned MRFs. And we'll start with Annalise Smith, since she has her hand up. And Waukesha County jointly owns a MRF. On a scale of 1 to 10, Annalise, how important is it to get quality materials?
I would put that at an 11. I mean, there's the costs of contamination cost the entire program. So you're, first of all, taking materials on a scenic route to the landfill when people put in material that shouldn't be in the recycling cart in the first place. And so that price per ton really messes with the program economics. Then that is not even to say that if the material were to damage equipment or damage other recyclables as well. So it makes, if if there's food contamination or oil contamination that can have even more reverberating impacts. So.
Thanks, Annalise. How about Portage County? Amanda Halfley, what is on a scale of 1 to 10? How important is it to get quality materials?
I'd say a 10. And one point I feel Annalise may have skimmed over was the safety aspect too. If we get too much contamination in there, it's a safety risk as well to our employees sorting.
Thank you, Amanda. I'd look to Brandon Knutson from one of our private sector MRFs. Brandon, can you share with us the challenge of not getting a quality recycling product?
Yeah, Melissa, I've got Larry here as well, Larry Hogum.
Hey, Larry.
Hi, Melissa.
So yeah, 10. I mean, it's important to our business model.
He's being conservative, Melissa. I say 100.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Larry.
yeah.
I can always count on you.
Like I said, it's as far as a public sector MRF compared to private sector next to private or a public, that, it's like we rely on that valuable material to run our business, to pay our employees and stuff. So it's taking a lot of that stuff's not subsidized, like you said, or at a public facility. But so yeah, it's important past belief.
Thank you, gentlemen. John Reisenbeekler, I see you're on Manitowoc County. How do you feel? Or you went to sleep and you're not on the line anymore. I'll go back over to Alex Nett over at Outagamie County. Alex?
I would have to agree with everybody from 11 to 100. It's super important for us. Not only for the things they mentioned, the safety, but in terms of what we're shipping to our buyers and the costs that are associated with that, and all of the time and effort that goes into returned materials or deductions on those materials. It's just waste. I don't want to say wasting, but it's taking up valuable time for our staff to make sure that these materials are getting, or not necessarily making sure, but that the materials are getting cleaned and sent to the right people. And if we do get deductions, then we have to follow up with that and then retraining and things like that. So it's just a lot of time and effort that goes into it in addition to what everybody else said.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone who's contributed. I think, and there's one suggestion here from Janice Suriano, who used to be one of my interns, fabulous person. And she says, could it be based on a saleable weight rather than a gross collected? Those are some of the conversations I think that need to take place as this moves forward. So good suggestion, Jana. I think we'll wrap it up. I know many of you probably have either not had lunch or have more meetings to go to. And I just, as Arrow's president and just a resident of Wisconsin, to see this much engagement and this much interest in kind of, somewhat esoteric sort of topic, recycling grant formula, it just makes me so happy to see this level of engagement. Once again, if you're interested in Arrow, you're not a member, you can find out more information at recyclemorewisconsin.org. Click on the Arrow tab. If you have questions about this afterwards, please feel free to reach out to Arrow. Feel free to reach out to me, our executive director, or any member of our board. We are here to support Wisconsin's recycling industry. And my sincere thanks to Karen and to Jennifer. Man, you knocked it out of the ballpark, and I'm just absolutely thrilled at the outcome. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and before we finish, Annalise put in the chat box a survey where we can gather input, more specific input about some of these questions. And maybe you didn't have the time or, really epiphany in this particular last hour to have some thoughts. We encourage you to share them afterwards. And after the recording is finished and placed on the website. I will share that to all the attendees. Again, you can also then, it's going to be still free in public, but you can share it then with others furthermore. And then I will also make sure that I share that link, because some of it may have already left the call here in the meeting. So I will make sure that they get that form and to help complete. And, you know, we're really, again, wanting that input, as Melissa already addressed. So thank you all. Again, you'll be getting emails from me, and watch for this presentation to be on the website, hopefully in the next week or so. So, all right. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.